Hello, and welcome to today's edition of Chapter by Chapter. I am your host, Will Cowan, and with me, like always, is Mr. Steve Haynes. Steve, how you doing today?
Well, I'm like a warm loaf of bread. Bacon. Beside a big old wheel of cheese.
Oh,
Just waiting to be nibbled on.
just waiting for it, aren't you? I'm with you. I feel the exact same way.
I'm ready for today's chapter. Chapter 19.
Yeah, today, Chapter 19. This one titled "Shadows Waiting." This is a great chapter to kind of like. This is a good breather chapter, but there's a lot of like tension building. This is probably the scariest chapter yet, believe it or not. And this is not really like a horror story for by any stretch of the imagination, but like it's a spooky one.
This is definitely some of the major spook factors. Yeah,
this is major spook factors. So let's get into it. We're coming off of them just coming over the hill in chapter 18, looking over the hill, and they're seeing Shadar Logoth. And its real name is actually Arthall.
Yeah, and so Moraine mentions that Arthall was a city, one of the greatest cities.
Yeah, it was a city that was allied with Manetheren during the Trolloc Wars. And she mentions that, like, I can't remember if it says is in this chapter, but she mentions that Arthall is, during the Trolloc Wars, was this thorn in the Dark One's foot. And the reason why they're going there is because they know that the Trollocs won't go looking for them in there. Now, it's not revealed.
Trollocs
won't go in there. Now, it's not revealed why the Trollocs won't go in there. But it's kind of just left at that, like, we're going to be safe here. So they enter Arthall. And if you remember from the last chapter, Steve, this city is huge. It is like,
yes,
they're like...
It is massive. Like, they thought that Baerlon, what was that place
Baerlon.
called?
They thought...
They thought that Rand thought that Baerlon was a big city. Then he saw this city, and he's like, I'm a jackass for thinking that Baerlon was a big city.
And Arthall,
because this is nuts,
is a big city with nobody in it. It's dead.
Yeah, so Arthall's a dead city. It's dead.
It's like a post-apocalyptic hellscape, essentially. But I was kind of thinking about this when I was reading this chapter, which was, do you have that memory when you were a kid? I guess this question is probably better suited for when they entered Baerlon, but I just thought of the question now. Do you have that memory of being a kid and going into like that city moment? Like when you see like the scope of a city?
Oh yeah.
You remember that?
Yeah, definitely. And you're just like, holy shit.
Yeah, exactly. I never had that as a kid, but I've talked to a few people. You're from a smaller town, so like coming into Toronto, I bet was like, whoa.
Yeah, when I was young.
And I never had that. But these guys must be like at the same point where you're just like, fuck, this is just it. This place has an Orange Julius everywhere. There's an Orange Julius on
every Starbucks on every corner.
On every corner. And they're stoked.
But so now that it's the destroyed, fallen, spooky version, it's now known as Shadar Logoth.
Shadar, is it Logoth or Logoth?
Logoth.
Just because it's spooky. Do you think when you become spooky, do you want a spooky name? Do you want to work on a spooky name?
Oh yeah, like Shadow or Dark Claw.
So this leads us into them finding that another thing that Rand mentions is that he's just looking at the size of the buildings and how every building has a dome on it. Like,
yeah, I pictured it like in the Phantom Menace.
Yeah, it's like Naboo.
On Naboo.
Yeah. It's like it's Naboo like mixed in with Dark Souls.
Yeah.
Spooky Naboo.
So they're on Spooky Naboo. They're on Spooky Naboo. They're walking around. Rand's losing his shit over how big everything is and how cool everything is. And then they get to a building.
It's like a crystal. It's like the whitest building that they found there. It's like I don't know if like it's white.
White, like, yeah, white stone. It's like, yeah,
Yeah,
it's white
white
stone.
stone. I don't know if that was because it's the stone that's using it, or the stone that they used, or if it's just a cleaner building. Like, I don't know if it's just like, oh, this one just magically just stays less dirty.
I took it as like white stone.
Really? Okay. So they enter this building. That's where they're going to camp out. I think it was Lan that goes like, we're going to camp out here tonight. And right at this moment, this is where you kind of see a divide in the group in a way. You kind of see it like throughout the chapter.
Well, Lan also starts calling them farm boys.
Yeah, well, when they get into the
which, I mean, they are.
yeah, exactly.
But nobody wants to be called a farm boy when you've just been in battle.
It's like, fuck you.
You're a battle farm boy.
That's my rap name.
Mm-hmm.
They get into this building, and Nynaeve, Lan, and Moraine kind of all Nynaeve, Lan, Moraine, and Egwene all just kind of like split off into their own group to kind of deal with Moraine, because Moraine is actually very tired at this point, and I think Nynaeve is trying to treat her and her fatigue for using those fucking herbs, baby. Remember when we said that Nynaeve was more of like an alchemist type,
a herbalist,
yeah, or herbalist.
alchemist.
She's the healer. She's the healer of this.
This is where she shows off her skills. She busts out a little foxtail and a little, what was the other one? Marison?
I don't know. It's weed.
I wrote the names down of these things. And that these are your opiates, guys.
Yeah. Oh yeah. This is the good stuff.
They mentioned that it'll help them sleep, but they might be a little groggy, but not too groggy. But
yeah,
it'll help you sleep through the pain and regain your energy.
Exactly. So that group kind of splits from the other group, and Lan says to the other group, which includes Matt, Perrin, Rand, and Tom, and says, take the horses in, or like, you take care of the horses or whatever. But it's very dismissive. Like,
well, he calls them farm boys. He's like, get the farm boys to take the horses.
Exactly. So, and
commands them.
Rand, I think the boys themselves don't take any offense to this, but Rand looks at Tom, and he sees like Tom is like, what the fuck? Like, how dare you compare me to this swine? Yeah.
Tom's like, I'm not a fucking farm boy. I'm a
gleeman.
Let me sing you a song. How about not a farm boy?
I am loved and respected across this entire land, and you are treating me with the utmost disrespect. So they bring in the horses, and this is where we got to do another addendum. We did it again, folks.
We did it again. Hey, there's a lot going on in these
books.
Man,
I get excited, and parts blend in for me here and there. So it is what it is. However, remember when we were talking about in the yesterday's episode where I was saying that Tom was telling Matt about his war cry, the thing that he yelled at before they got into the big battle last time? You remember that?
Yeah, and that he was like royal. He was a Manetheren
exactly.
Royalty.
So that whole conversation that we spent like 5 minutes on last episode talking about, that happens here.
So see that episode.
Yeah. Because we're not going to cover that anymore. For the speed readers out there, Matt's apparently connected to royalty, but it's not really confirmed in a way. But judging by I don't know.
Judging by things that are starting to happen,
probably
because anytime when they say like, hey, it probably isn't, it probably is.
So Rand actually has like a thought at that moment where I don't know if he took it as like kind of like jealousy, but I think there's a little like sentence or something like that where Rand is kind of like looks at Matt and he just feels a little angry. He feels a little angry that he has that history. And I think it's kind of comparing to the fact that Rand doesn't even know his own history. You know?
That's got to be what it is. Yeah, because he's finding things out all the time, being told that things are important, that he's not important, that they are, and that this is true and this isn't, having crazy dreams. He just wants answers.
Yeah, so after Rand's kind of having this kind of like moment of self-reflection, Matt gets some itchy feet. He's like, boys, we've been through some hell.
We deserve some treasure hunting.
I love I love that. Like, it kind of makes you think that, well, it reinforces the fact that these are kids, like, or just like very young people. Because like,
guys, have you noticed that there's nobody in this city? Like, no one.
Treasure.
But you know what there definitely is?
There's treasure. There's definitely a lot of treasure. You know what abandoned cities mean? Treasure. And Matt kind of does his like Matt charm, where he's like, come on guys, it'll be fun, and that's kind of, he
talks them all into it.
Yeah, he talks them all into it, and that's kind of like Nynaeve makes that point a couple of times throughout the story so far, or a couple of people do, where Matt is kind of like, he's the troublemaker. He's the one that just kind of like brings everybody down to his level, which is great. You need somebody like that in your party.
Yeah, so basically he's like, look at all these big, crazy Naboo towers. Yeah. Let's climb one. Let's get in there. Let's go to the top.
Let's go.
Then out of nowhere, there's a voice that's like, the towers are not safe.
Yeah, it's like a weird...
I wouldn't do that if I was you.
These aren't the droids you're looking for. Yeah, a spooky voice out of the corner while they're just kind of like looking around, treasure hunting. I think they leave Tom behind. They're out in a different place by this point. Tom is still...
went to go smoke cigarettes like a while ago. He was just like, I'm just going to smoke.
That totally is what he's doing. He's just sitting somewhere real sad, just hacking dark.
No, it actually is. I'm pretty sure they mentioned at one point that he went to go
really?
Smoke.
Oh, yeah. I didn't catch that because that's amazing. I would have laughed out loud if that was. Oh, you know what? Actually, now it's clicking, and I do remember this. The line is like, "I'm gonna go have a smoke."
Yeah, that's the line. All right, I'm gonna go have a smoke now. So we can assume he's still doing that.
Yeah, he's still smoking. So they're all by themselves, and they hear that voice, and they turn around, and this guy, he's a spooky looking guy. Like, he's got a black robe and a hood. He's kind of like the description I think I remember is like he's skinny but well fed, which is
just skinny.
Yeah, it's just skinny.
So this guy comes out. I feel like he looks like Vincent Price in a big black hood. But, he can look like whatever you really want him to look like, or he can look like how he's described. Yeah. Regardless of that.
Matthew McConaughey.
His name is Mordeth.
My bad guys. Yeah.
Exactly.
Well, he says his name like, I am Mordeth. And there's a
Mordeth. And he twists his little pencil mustache.
And there's this little like tagline. There's this little tag sentence at the end of it where he goes like, I am Mordeth. And then Robin Jordan writes this little line that's fantastic where he goes like, he says this as if he was expecting them to know who he was. And then he paused for a couple of seconds until he realized they didn't know who he was. And he looked pretty upset about that.
Yeah. Amazing.
He's probably been like waiting years to go do this entrance that like where he sneaks up on somebody and he goes like, I am Mordeth.
I wouldn't do that if I was you.
Yeah. And everybody's like, who the hell are you? And he's like, oh man. Anyways.
So he goes on to tell them that he himself is a treasure hunter.
Yeah. Well, like, he's like asking them who they are and they're asking him who he is. And he's like, I'm also a treasure hunter, and you guys are from, or they say that they're from, I can't remember. They're from somewhere else. They're there for different reasons. But they don't really say too much because Matt's like, let's go with him. He says that there's treasure here. That's what Mordeth said. He's like, I know where there's treasure around here.
Well, he's like, I've got treasure and I need help carrying it.
Right.
That sounds like a trap.
Yeah,
I've ever heard one.
Yeah, I mean, the last time I heard somebody, I'm not even going to use that.
Yeah, don't even go there.
So he's like, come with me, and help me with my treasure. And they follow him, and he takes them on this kind of like weird goose chase of a path. Like they're going up buildings and down buildings and going in and around and down, and then they go to this stairway that kind of like twists downward into like a basement or something like that. And as they keep going down, it gets darker and darker and darker until it is pitch black. And I think every single one of them is kind of like, I don't think we should be doing this right now. But Matt is just persisting. He's like, let's just keep going. Let's keep going.
Gotta get that treasure, guys.
Treasure. He's got treasure fever.
This guy's name is Mordeth. He knows where treasure is.
Oh, that's good. They finally go down to this deep, dark hole, the basement thing, somewhere in the city, and there's like, does Mordeth like kind of like light a fire or something like that, or they just like come into a place where there is fire and light? Because when it's illuminated, when the room that they're in lightens up, there's just piles of treasure. Mordeth wasn't lying.
He was not lying. Turns out, treasure on treasure on treasure.
Treasure on treasure. And Matt does that Scrooge McDuck thing where he dives in it, like all the gold.
Yeah, I mean, you got to.
How you only get very little opportunity in life to do that, and you got to take it. So while he's swimming around, Matt's like, I think they're all just kind of talking like, okay, we'll help you take all this treasure up. And then I think it's Rand or Perrin. Somebody mentions like, I wonder what the others are going to think about this.
Yeah, and he says, who others?
Yeah, Mordeth is like,
wait,
what do you mean?
Huh?
What?
Who are you talking about?
You didn't say that there were others around here. Something like that. And
but Matt's like, yeah, and he's like, there's a bunch of us, and he lists everyone, and he's like, yeah, this is our party, and we're on our way to Tarvalon.
It's something about Tarvalon like sets him off, like sets Mordeth off. He just like
gets super pissed.
How dare you say that around me? So I don't think he's a big fan of Aes Sedai. Anyways, that's when Rand notices that Mordeth doesn't have a shadow. Everybody else has a shadow except Mordeth. And when he looks,
spooky.
It's spooky. When that happens, he kind of like points it out, and then Mordeth turns into this giant smoke monster beast. He just
balloon thing.
Yeah, he just like blows up into this giant mass and kind of takes over the entire room. And that's where like Rand and Perrin start like slashing at him, or like whatever they can see of him, or just to try to protect themselves. And then Matt, while he's swimming around, he finds a ruby dagger and he snatches it. He's like, mine.
Yeah, and so the ruby dagger is interesting of note, because that was one of the things we saw a few chapters ago in the prophecy that Min saw.
Right.
One of Matt's items was a ruby dagger.
Exactly. Yeah. I think it was the same prophecy where like Lan had 7 towers crumbled around his head and like all this other crazy stuff. But
there's a bunch of them, and this being the first. Well, I think this is the first one that's popped up. First one that we've caught, at least.
Actually, there's another one that I missed actually, because before we were recording this show, I did like a quick look at it, and part of that prophecy was like Min saw a red eagle, part of Matt's prophecy. And as we know of what the Manetheren war cry was, it's about the red eagle, the red sun, you know, like it's connected to that. So I think there's obviously now it's confirmed that he's connected to the royalty.
Something's happening. Something's shaping up here.
Something's shaping up here. Anyways, as they're slashing, hacking, and Matt stealing, they bail. They hightail it out of there, and they're screaming their heads off. They just turn into like children again, and they run their asses out of that building. And they come out of the building, and they go right into the middle of the street, screaming and yelling. I think they kind of like get themselves together once they're in the street here, or do they just keep running all the way back to?
They keep running until they get back to the stone building.
Right. But while they're on their way back, Rand is like looking at the buildings, and he's like, I don't know if he's seeing or is he more feeling like different eyes. Like
feeling. I think he's feeling.
Yeah. like something watching him. So it's not just Mordeth out there. There's other shadow creatures.
Other shadowy shadows afoot.
Or maybe it's like Mordeth multiplied. He just turned into a balloon. I don't know what else he's capable of. Maybe it's little like versions of himself plopped around everywhere.
Who knows? But they get back to the White Building, and everyone's back at the White Building, except for Lan. And they're like, yeah, Lan's out looking for you guys.
And they're like, no!
And they're like, what do you mean Lan's out looking for us? We're here looking for Lan. But they start to explain what happened, and they tell Moraine, they tell everyone, but Moraine is there, and she doesn't like what she heard.
Well, they say they mention Mordeth. They mention his name, and she's like, "What do you mean? Like, how do you know of Mordeth? Like, how do you know that name? How did you find out? Well, there was this guy. He said that there was treasure. Guess what? There's not. But his name is Mordeth, and he's out there. He's waiting for us."
Yeah, grabs Moran's hand and is like, "Did you take any of that shit?"
Yeah, and he says no, but I don't think Matt speaks up. I think he keeps it.
Well, it's a sweet dagger, and it was part of a prophecy.
Oh yeah, you gotta hold on to that. After like when Moraine kind of like confronts them about this, and they're like, "We don't know who he is," and then Moraine goes on. She basically does another one of those big tales that she goes on. She loves her storytelling.
Yeah, it's basically just trying to instill more fear about Shatter Logoth and the Trollocs and the Dark Friends and the Myrddraals and the Death Eaters,
it's all the same, man. But the story that she tells kind of boils down to this. Mordeth was this guy that came to Arthall to help the king that was there. And under his kind of like tutelage or kind of like leadership, Mordeth kind of came as like an advisor. But during that time, Arthall just kind of fell apart, and it's Moraine is basically describing that Mordeth is more or less involved with the destruction of Arthall and its becoming of Shadar Logoth. And then what's great here is that she's like, I'm not going to go into the history of it. And then she's like, there's like a 25 line chunk of dialogue where she's like, I'm also not going to get into this part of the history. And I'm also not going to get into this part of the history. And she just lists this. It's like, God damn. She just wants to keep talking.
It's extensive.
Oh, yeah. I think at that point, Lan comes back. Like after she explains the story, or during that time.
Well, they're all like wrapping up and going to sleep, and then Lan shows up, and Rand gets up to be like, "What the fuck? What's going on, Lan?"
Yeah, and he's everybody gets up now, and Lan is like, "I just looked around, and we've got company. There is a bunch of Trollocs being led by Myrddraal heading directly for us right now. I don't know how they're able to get into Shadar Logoth. Oh, that's another thing I gotta get into. Maybe I'll edit this back so it flows a little bit better. But part of the reason why the Trollocs don't like the Arthall or Shadar Logoth
can't swim
is because, well, no. During that time, no, that's a good one. During that time where Mordeth was kind of in control of this place, the Trollocs camped here during the Trolloc Wars, or just after the Trolloc Wars, or something like that. And there was a group of Trollocs that just stayed there for the night, and then nobody found them ever again. They just disappeared off the face of the earth. They had some scouts. Trollocs had some scouts to go into Shadar Logoth to check it out, see what happened to that squad, that group, that fist, whatever it was. And they just come across this horrible, bloody scene of just parts of these guys just spread fucking everywhere.
Trolloc parts everywhere.
Exactly. And that's been kind of the reason why Trollocs have never gone back to Shadar Logoth. It's bad juju. They don't want to deal with that stuff.
It's fair.
So Lan saying that these Trollocs are on their way, they all kind of like take a pause together, and they're just like, okay, if they're afraid to come here and they're being forced to come after us, and the Myrddraal are being forced to come after us, like, this is serious. And Lan is like, the only, like, they're so afraid right now that they're not going off a very designated path. Like, they're going straight ahead.
Yeah.
Which
they're just hightailing.
Yeah, which means that, like, they're afraid, so they don't want to stray off the path. But he also says, like, if they weren't coming directly for us, I'd say we wouldn't have anything to worry about. They would have been able to pass us, and we've been fine. But they're coming straight for us, and we have to go. So the plan is to get to the river. Can't remember which river it is. I want
to get to the river. Either make a raft, find a boat, get across that river, because the Trollocs and Myrddraal can't swim.
And I think they all kind of gear themselves up, and they step out the door to face the shadows, and the Trollocs, and just get the hell out of there. And that's where we end. That's the end of this chapter.
Woo!
It's a very spooky one. I like it. So that wraps up today. Thank you all for listening. And we'll be back. As always. And we'll be back tomorrow for chapter 20.